Going to solve this quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. The quadratic equation is 2x squared minus x equals 4. And the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if we're going to use the quadratic formula to solve this, first thing you need to do is get everything to one side equal to 0. It's called standard form. So that 4 needs to be moved to the left side. If you subtract 4 from each side, we end up with 2x squared minus x minus 4 is equal to 0. So now that's in standard form. Everything's to one side equal to 0. We're ready to use the quadratic formula. If you notice, the quadratic formula has a, b, and c. A is the coefficient of x squared. The number in front of the x squared, in this case, it's 2. B is the coefficient of x. The number in front of the x, it's negative 1. And c is the constant term, the number without a variable, that is negative 4. So a is 2, b is negative 1, c is negative 4. Now we're simply going to substitute those in to this quadratic formula. So again, the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. If you substitute in, take the negative of b, that'd be the negative of a negative 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. In this case, it's negative 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 4. And then that's all over 2a, which in this case is 2 times 2. Notice it says x equals. So what we're doing here is we're solving this quadratic equation for x using the quadratic formula. Just keep working through this. Watch your signs. Very important you watch your signs. Most mistakes people make when they're using the quadratic formula is a positive or negative sign out of place. So take the negative of a negative 1, it's positive 1, plus or minus the square root of negative 1 squared. If you square negative 1, that is 1. And then right here usually is where the mistakes appear. Negative 4 times 2 times negative 4, it's positive 32. So you write plus 32. That's all over 2a, which in this case is 2 times 2, which is 4. Keep working through that. Under the square root sign, 1 plus 32, that is 33. So it'd be x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 33 all over 4. That's two solutions. You have 1 plus the square root of 33 over 4 and 1 minus the square root of 33 over 4. That is what x equals. That's simplest radical form. If you want to go to decimal form, very easy. Just figure out what the square root of 33 is, take 1 plus that divided by 4, and 1 minus whatever the square root of 33 is, divide that by 4 as well. So it ends up being 1.69 approximately, and negative 1.19. Those are the x-intercepts. It's where that graph crosses the x-axis. Remember, when you solve a quadratic equation for x, what you're finding is where that graph hits the x-axis. In this case, it hits the x-axis at 1.69 and also negative 1.19. Those are the x-intercepts of the graph of that quadratic equation, which is a parabola. By the way, this parabola opens upward because the coefficient of x squared is positive. And also the y-intercept is the constant term when it's in standard form. So you can see the y-intercept is at negative 4. So the x-intercepts are 1.69, negative 1.19. Parabola opens upward because the coefficient of x squared is positive, and the y-intercept is the constant term in standard form, in this case, negative 4. Going to solve this quadratic equation for x using the quadratic formula. X squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0. Notice everything is to one side equal to 0. That's standard form, so we don't have to get this in standard form. It's already there. What we do have to do is pick out a, b, and c if we're going to use the quadratic formula. A is the coefficient of x squared. In this case, it's 1. B is the coefficient of x. The number in front of the x, that's 6. And c is the constant term, the number without a variable, that is 9. Once again, the quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's what x equals. So just substitute a, b, and c in. Substitute 6 in for b. So take the negative of b, that'd be the negative of 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, that is 6 squared, minus 4ac would be minus 4 times 1 times 9. That's all over 2a, which in this case is 2 times 1. Work through that and watch your signs. Take the negative of 6, it's already there, negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared, that's 36, minus 4ac. Watch this area right here. This is usually where people make mistakes. Negative 4 times 1 times 9, that is negative 36. Keep working through that. Under the square root sign, 36 minus 36 is 0. So we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 0 all over 2. The square root of 0 is 0, so it'd be negative 6 all over 2. If you have negative 6 plus or minus 0 over 2, it's still just going to be negative 6 over 2. So negative 6 over 2, that reduces to be negative 3. So we've solved that for x. We got x equals -3. That is the x-intercept. So when you graph that quadratic equation, you can see it hits the x-axis at -3. Just one solution here, and that is -3. The y-intercept, by the way, is 9. It's the constant term when it's in standard form. You can see that the y-intercept, it's hitting the y-axis at 9. Also, the parabola opens upward because the coefficient of x squared is positive. But there is an easier way that you could have done this, and that is by factoring. So you see the work it takes to solve by using the quadratic formula. You could have also factored that into two binomials. So x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0. If you factor that into two binomials, the first terms of those two binomials would be x. The second terms multiply to make 9 and add to make 6. It's going to be 3 and 3. Those two multiply together to equal 0, so you'd set each one equal to 0, but it's the same thing, so just set x plus 3 equals 0. And notice we're getting the same answer, x equals -3, but with a lot less work. So there are times when you want to use the quadratic formula, and there are times when you want to factor. Either factor out the common factor or factor into two binomials and set those factors equal to 0. So when you're solving quadratic equations, the situation will present itself as far as which method you use. But in this case, however you choose to do it, x equals -3. Going to find the solutions using the quadratic formula is 2x times x minus 1 equals 3. Remember, if you're going to use the quadratic formula, the first thing you need to do is get this in standard form. That's where everything's to one side equal to 0 and also no parentheses. So take out the parentheses by using the distributive property. Take 2x times x, that is 2x squared, and 2x times -1, that'd be -2x. So 2x squared minus 2x equals 3, but we're still not there yet. You have to move that 3 to the left side by subtracting 3 from each side. And if you do that, you get 2x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0. Now we're ready to use the quadratic formula. Pick out a, b, and c. A is the coefficient of x squared. The number in front of the x squared is 2. B is the coefficient of x. The number in front of the x is -2. And c is the constant term, the number without a variable, that is -3. So if you substitute those in to the quadratic formula, watch your signs. Take the negative of b. That'd be the negative of a -2. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, that is -2 squared, minus 4ac, it's minus 4 times 2 times -3, and that's all over 2a, which in this case is 2 times 2. This is what x is going to equal. These are going to be the x-intercepts. Watch your signs. Most mistakes are made in this area right here, with this -4 times 2 times -3. However, they could occur anywhere. If you take the negative of a -2, it's going to be +2. Plus or minus the square root of -2 squared, that is +4. And then this right here, -4 times 2 times -3, that's going to be a positive or plus 24. That's all over 2a, which in this case is 2 times 2, and that is 4. Keep working through that. Under the square root sign, 4 plus 24, that is 28. So it'd be 2 plus or minus the square root of 28, all over 4. Now if you go into simplest radical form, that square root of 28 will break down. Think of factors of 28. What factor of 28 is a perfect square, has a perfect square root? 4. So you could break that square root of 28 into the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. So it's 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 7, all over 4. The square root of 4 is 2. So it'd be 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 7, all over 4. Now in the numerator, you can factor a 2 out. 2 is a common factor in the numerator, and then that will cancel with the 4 in the denominator. So factor 2 out of the numerator, divide each term in that numerator by 2. You end up with 2 times 1 plus or minus the square root of 7, all over 4. Now the 2 and the 4 will cancel. So if you cancel the 2 and the 4, you have 1 plus or minus the square root of 7, all over 2. There are two solutions there. 1 plus the square root of 7 over 2, and also 1 minus the square root of 7 all over 2. In decimal form, if you take the square root of 7 to a decimal, take 1 plus that divided by 2, 1 minus that divided by 2, you'll end up with approximately 1.82 and -0.82. So those are the x-intercepts. It's where the graph of that quadratic equation hits the x-axis. You can see it hits the x-axis at 1.82 and -0.82. Also, the y-intercept is the constant term when it's in standard form, so it hits the y-axis at -3. And the parabola opens upward because the coefficient of x squared is positive. Your school's band is selling CDs as a fundraiser. The total profit P depends on the amount X that your band charges for each CD. The equation P equals -x squared plus 48x minus 300 models the profit of the fundraiser. What is the least amount in dollars you can charge for a CD to make a profit of $200. So again, up there, the total profit is P. So that 200 is going to go in for P into that quadratic equation. So replace the P with 200. You have 200 equals negative x squared plus 48x minus 300. It says the amount x your band charges for each CD, and we want to find the least amount you charge for a CD. So that x is what we want to solve for. That's going to give us the price of the CD. So to solve that for x, we need to get everything to one side equal to 0. We're going to subtract 200 from each side. We have negative x squared plus 48x minus 500 equals 0. And now we can use the quadratic formula. Pick out a, b, and c. A is the coefficient or the number in front of the x squared, that's negative 1. B is the coefficient of x, or the number in front of the x, it's 48. And c is the constant term, the number without a variable, that is negative 500. If you put those into the quadratic formula, take the negative of b, that'd be the negative of 48, plus or minus the square root of b squared, that is 48 squared, minus 4ac, it'd be minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 500. And that's all over 2a, which is 2 times negative 1. Keep working through that. It'd be negative 48 plus or minus the square root of 48 squared is 2,304. And then watch your signs right here. Negative 4 times negative 1 times negative 500, that is negative 2,000. That's all over 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2. Take 2304 minus 2,000, that is 304. So it'd be negative 48 plus or minus the square root of 304 all over negative 2. We're solving for x. This is what x is going to equal. This is going to be the price of the CD. Find the square root of 304. Now, since we're going for a price here, we're going to take this to a decimal because we want an actual dollar amount. So the square root of 304 is approximately 17.43. So take negative 48 plus 17.43 divided by negative 2, and negative 48 minus 17.43 divided by negative 2. That gives you the two prices, 15.29, 32.72. So those are the two prices of the CDs, $15.29, $32.72. Make sure you answer what's being asked. What's being asked is what is the least amount in dollars you can charge for a CD to make a profit of 200. So we set this equal to 200. We solve for x. We get these two prices. The least amount will be that $15.29. So the correct answer here, least amount in dollars you can charge for a CD to make a profit of 200 is $15.29.